Mic check. 1, 2. Hey, beautiful people. Happy Thanksgiving. I feel like I'm on a Starship Enterprise. You know, start date, November, Thanksgiving, 2020. The crew is in a mutiny right now, and there's been an upheaval, an uprising against me, the captain. And so then we can all nerd out on, which Star Trek was the best, who was the best captain, Kirk or Picard, or, you newer gen Star Trek watchers have your captains and whatnot. But feels like I'm the captain of this huge shit, and all of these lives are my responsibility. Hopefully there's no uprising or no conspiracy against me. But at the same time, I am a huge conspiracy theorist. Not going to put any of that energy into this podcast. Maybe a little bit. It's in a little bit of everything that I say. It's in a little bit. I'm not going to put a timer on this podcast. There's a huge amount of responsibility I feel for being cognizant on this podcast. And so I'm not sure how to go about approaching this topic or these topics. But I will piece my way through them slowly but surely. All right. So you clicked on the graphic of my thumbnail. And I chose that graphic and that thumbnail. I designed that for a purpose and with a purpose, because I was so touched and I was so moved by the documentary. So let me give you a little backstory. 2 people sent me a Instagram link. One was my cousin, and shout out to Pastor Jimmy Lee Wilson. Down in Mississippi. Shout out to Pascagoula. Shout out to Moss Point, that area, the Gulf Coast. Shout out to the Gulf Coast. He sent me a link, which I didn't see. And then I received the same link from, I think it was another producer in Europe. That we trade comedy videos. So I get this link and I'm like, oh, Dave Chapelle. Dave Chapelle has an Instagram. Dave Chapelle is posting on Instagram. Oh, snap. It's called Unforgiven. Okay, cool. I'll check this out. And so I began to watch what I now know as a documentary. And I give it that respect because I'm a documentary buff, and this is nothing less than a chronicle of times. This thing is epic, and so I want to frame it that way on this particular podcast, just in case if you haven't seen the Dave Chapelle Unforgiven documentary. It is on his Instagram page. And so as I'm watching this documentary, after a minute goes by, after 2 minutes go by, after 5 minutes go by, after 10 minutes go by, around the 8-10 minute mark, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm watching a documentary on the main page, and I didn't have to go to Reels, and I didn't have to go to Story, and this is not a live video, and this is not posted in the Instagram TV section. Oh, Dave Chapelle is different. He different. He can post a 20-minute video on his main page. He ain't like the rest of us. We got to go through protocols. So I'm watching this documentary, right? And I'm curious about that part of, you know, the production, but the graphic is what I'm getting to. I chose that graphic because I, at my heart, am an audio guy. And when I saw him do the mic drop, sound man hate when mic get treat bad. And as a fan of Dave Chappelle, I thought that this was so authentic, and I thought that it was so beautiful that he did the mic drop at that point and at that time. Me being a sound man, I still respect the mic drop. And his mic drop was so well timed. No matter how it makes the levels go crazy on the soundboard, no matter how it feels against your eardrums, when it comes through the board and blast you as a sound man, you have to respect the power of this particular mic drop. And so I chose that screenshot to put on this particular podcast because of how heavy the weight of this mic drop is. And so I think I'm going to title this podcast something like How Producers, Mixing Engineers, actually not really, unless you're under contract, how producers and artists in general should look at this Unforgiven documentary. Not Dave Chappelle. Dave is the medium of which this message is being conveyed. And the message is what I want to highlight. If you hear a bunch of sirens in the background, I'm in Chicago. It's early morning. And so I imagine, especially with, coronavirus and everything that's happening right now, people are waking up to chaos. And so not to go into details, you know what's going on right now. It's ambulances, it's police cars, fire trucks, that type of thing. It happens every morning in Chicago. You get used to it. So, this one's getting really close. Interesting thing before I go. There's a law signed. Actually, no, I'm not going to talk about that law. That's a bad thing to talk about. So, back to Unforgiven. I'm having a little bit of super coffee this morning. And it has 0 sugar, 0 calories, and 7 grams of protein. And it's made by a company called Keto. And it's keto based. It's really good. Not amazing. It's sweetened with monk fruit. It's not real sugar, so it does have that natural sugar taste. So if you're not used to that, if you don't like that, you probably won't like it. But anyways, so producers and artists, look at this documentary. Look at it. Listen to the content from the angle of a business person. Please do yourself a favor. And I have to be careful how I frame this particular podcast because I don't want to lead people the wrong way. And I don't want to make this podcast about being black in this country, even though I could easily do that. Or, there's a lot of different ways I could frame this. But Dave, as profound as he is, as philosophical as he is, as hilarious as he is, takes the time out to weave jokes into a very, very serious topic and something that I've been studying for decades, dating myself. We have a library here in Chicago, and it's huge. It's one of the biggest libraries It's probably the biggest library I've been inside of in my life. It's called the Harold Washington Library. And there is a plethora of resources there. They have a music floor where you can go and play piano. I went in there and recorded some things. It's amazing, the music floor. On that floor, they have resources. They have books. They have, to make a short story long, I would go in there and I would lay on the floor and I would just read books for hours and hours and hours, right? And I would study music. I would study contracts. I would study record labels. I would study all these different things. And, over the years, I've learned a lot of things about this industry, which is a reason why I've kept my distance from a lot of entertainment, certain types of entertainment. As an artist, I'm not the best at ethics. I'm not the best at being the most moral character. At the same time, I was raised a certain way, and there's certain practices that go on in entertainment industry that I've never agreed with. And here Dave Chapelle is putting this thing on a platform and airing it out for everybody to see and hear and witness. And he's using his own content as a speaking point and using himself as the proverbial martyr. It's profound. But to bring things back to the way that I need to frame this is so in big entertainment business, there are practices and there are rules, there are unspoken rules, there are things that you do and you don't do, there are things that you say and you don't say, you can't say, you should never say. And so here we have this entertainer, this artist, this content creator saying all the things that you shouldn't say. Talking about all the stuff that you shouldn't talk about. And bringing the issue that artists have been dealing with since the first recording button was pressed back in the early, let's say, 1900s. You would have companies come to slave quarters and in the rural areas where black people resided and recorded choirs. They would document things. And, I don't want to frame people as being thieves and crooks and things like that stole from black people, even though that happened. A lot of those people were not paid. And a lot of those things were used for documentaries and they were used for historic relic purposes. Art and artistry has been stolen from artists since, cracking open Egyptian tombs. So it's not something that it's a fine line, whether you're taking it, whether you're stealing it, whether it's being signed over to you. And that's the thing that Dave is doing this amazing job of bringing front to center. So as a content creator, as a producer, as an artist, you have to see this documentary and you have to dig into the importance, and this is the premise of this particular podcast, mental health as an artist, mental health as a producer, because this is the thing that I think Dave is promoting. He made a big point to say that Netflix did their part of making sure that his bad feeling would go away, right? A lot of times in business, people don't care about how you feel. You know, people don't care about your feelings. It's about business. It's about getting this money. You know what I'm saying? It's about grinding and hustling and getting this paper, getting this bag. We got to go get this bag. We can get it together. You can get with me or get out my way. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to run you up. You woo, 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 woo. And so, Dave does a good job of conveying that, you know, this particular company has made sure that they've done their part of doing something that they don't have to do. They're making sure that my mental is okay. And the thing I want to highlight about this, above everything, with this particular podcast, season 2, episode 2, is make sure that you are taking care of your mental health. A lot of artists locally, I've talked to local artists that have gotten bad deals, signed bad deals, gotten their name taken away. They can't use their name. Sued for breach of contract, signed a contract that put them in a situation where they had to find their own way to tour dates and didn't have money to make the dates. They had to make their own hotel. They had to pay their own gas. They just had to show up at the venue and got sued for breach of contract and lost their name because the label was not paying for all that. The label was just booking dates. We're going to book the dates for you. They lost their name because, you know, they didn't make the dates. Artists sometimes, no, not sometimes. This happens way too often. A lot of artists are in situations, and if you're listening to this and you're not from America, if you're not in the USA, understand this. There are a lot of areas in this country that are like your third world country situations. In 2020, there are places in the United States, you won't see this on TV. You won't see this on YouTube all the time. There are places where people don't have sustainable living conditions, no running water. We have places in the U.S. where the water that does run is poisoned. People can't drink it. They can't bathe in it. They can't cook with it. And so I have to frame it that way so you get the understanding that artists sometimes come from lifestyles that aren't the best. They are horrible. They're horrid conditions where people are trying to not get shot. They're trying to save their families from conditions where they can't even eat healthy food, right? And big business or moderate business and even some small business will sign them to deals or present them with contracts that are not in their best interest. You could probably reach out to some producers on Instagram and say, hey, how are things going with your publishing deal? That big bag that they gave you up front. How's that going? And they'll tell you, I don't make money off my publishing. They do. I got my 50K, I got my 100K, I got my $1 million up front, and everything I make now, they get all or a piece of. Newer artists, 360 deals. Read a contract, man. Learn how to read your contracts. But people are pulled into these situations where they're coming from a place where it would behoove them to sign a deal or any deal to get money right away, but it doesn't behoove them in the long term to keep and maintain their ownership of their work. Now, here in the U.S., once you create something, if you write a poem, if you write a song, if you create some video content, you own it. And I'm gonna tread lightly here. I'm gonna tread very lightly here because this is a legality. You own it. It is the best practice because there's a lot of different theories about you can mail things to yourself and keep it sealed, and then the judge will accept that. That is false. It's a good practice, but legally you need to have things filed with the Copyright Office and with the Patent Office here in the U.S. And so in the event that someone steals your work, or in the event that you need to sue someone or something like that, you have it filed with the U.S. government that your particular song or poem or work has been properly taken care of and is recognized by the government, right? So this is heavy, but it's important for mental health. You get your work, patented. You get your work copyrighted. I've never known how to say that correctly. You take it to the process for copyright. And once you do that, then your title, the government recognizes the title of that work as being copywritten and owned by the person who submits the copyright first. And that's important too. There was a particular situation online. I won't bring it out, but there's two huge forces of content creators that the one artist had no dealings with the writing or the recording or anything of a song. He then took that song and brought the artist onto his YouTube channel. They recorded a video and he uploaded it and was able to collect. He then copyrighted that particular song, right? And had no dealings with the writing or the music or anything, and collected the rights to that particular song and the other artists that's out. And so it happens on the lower level too. It's not just big companies that take advantage of artists. You have artists that take advantage of other artists as well. And so mentally, long term, when you have someone else who is collecting your living wages from your work, man, that's a blow. That's a huge blow to what happens with you, what happens with your family, what happens with, and when you wrap your head around that this happens every day to a plethora of artists in this country. It's happening with K-pop artists. It's happening all over the world. And in other countries, it's a lot worse, man. I hear stuff is being run like, okay, so let's just call it out. It's slavery, right? It's modern day slavery. And from what I'm reading and from what I'm researching, some of these artists from other countries that aren't from the U.S., they're being abused, right? So, if you're an artist, you're not making money, you have it bad. Some artists are not getting paid and they're being beaten and whipped into submission, right? So let me keep it, 1,000,000,000% real on this. So yeah, let me get back on track. So you own what you make. You copyright what you make. If you're an inventor, you patent what you make, right? And you're protected. You learn to read a contract. If you don't know how, you try to find a decent lawyer that's not going to take a payoff from a big company to put you in a bad situation. There's a quote in the Bible. Jesus said, "Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." um, anonymously, keep your lawyer in a place where there's no fraternizing with the label or no fraternizing with the company that you're dealing with. That way, and that's not always easy, but it's a better situation to have someone be your reader and you pay them a consulting fee to relegate what that information means to you rather than having somebody show up. And what that means is, in layman's terms, you just don't want them to be in cahoots. You don't want your manager to be your lawyer, to be your record label, to be, and that's a whole nother thing that artists sometimes, your the record label exec should not be your manager. He shouldn't be your lawyer, right? The roles shouldn't be mixed up, but that's a whole nother conversation. And I'm speaking from the artist point of view. I'm speaking from the producer point of view. And I'm framing this in a way that as an artist and as a producer, you can understand how this particular documentary can learn you something, how it can teach you something. Dave is a genius, man. And I read a quote that said that the music industry is a lot like seeing who can live on nothing the longest. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And the reason why it's amazing is because I've been studying performing rights organizations, and that's a whole other conversation, bro, because it's bananas out here with these PROs. If you don't know what a PRO is, go look it up. There's some good ones, there's some shady ones, there's some, I don't know. But if you're a producer, if you're an artist, you probably already know what a PRO is. If you don't know what a PRO is, God help you. All right, so you don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, right? And in a lot of cases, when you're a newer artist or you are a entertainer who is not versed in how the industry works, when you are being invited to the table to have a sit down, you're being wined and dined. You're being honeymooned. You go through the honeymoon phases and then the real marriage starts. And you realize, oh, snap, I've signed my life away to this. And it gets real. I'm just so thankful for you, Dave. If you ever get a chance to listen to this podcast, thank you so much for your sacrifice over the years to bring the content and also for this selfless display. And hopefully you'll get the payout that comes on the other side of this. So when you think about mental health versus not making money for your hard-earned work, it's akin to slavery in that someone else is driving you to work for free and they get all the benefits and you get nothing. It's the same as how when you look at our postal system, our internet, our cable system, our phone lines that are run underground, all of these things are driven by free labor. Free labor. And when you hear phrases like tarnation and cotton picking. You have to understand what Dave is talking about when he's saying it's the same monster that is raping women for roles. It's the same monster that is putting people into slavery. It's the same monster that will put a person in a situation who comes from nothing to sign their entire life away and everything that they're going to create for a bag. It's horrid. It's insidious. It is grotesque. It is appalling. It's absurd. It is I don't have enough words to describe how just it's a feeling, of being smiled at while you're being raped or murdered. That's what it feels like. And I have been in this situation. And I think that when people want you to work for free, there's certain cues that you should recognize on the front end. Because entertainment is all about front end and back end money. And that may be another podcast. But to touch on that, if there's no front end money, there's usually no back end money. And if there's a huge amount of front end money, make sure you pay attention to your back end money. Right? That's all contractual. I can't go any deeper than that. I could, but you got to pay attention to what you're signing. A lot of my favorite producers and production companies have done documentaries. There's a lot of old rock stars that I like watching their documentaries. They'll tell you straight up, yo, we didn't get nothing. We ain't making nothing. If we made something, it was a little bit of this, and it's just like, yo, how did you survive? And we are looking at that happen in real time with Dave Chapelle, right? And he's giving us the play-by-play, right? And so mentally, right? What does it feel like to be an oppressor? And what does it feel like to be unforgiven? And what does it feel like for those two things to coincide together, right? If I'm big record label and I'm a pressing artist, and those artists are in a situation where they are holding something against me, what is my ethical and moral duty? Is it business, right? Or is it the ethics and the morals, the right thing to do? And so that's a debacle for people who don't have ethics and don't have morality, right? That's a debacle for people who are money driven, they're greedy, and they're envious of a skill that they don't even have, but yet they put so many things in place to be able to own content that they could never create themselves. It's amazing. It's amazing to sit in an office, right, and have this plantation of artists that don't have a situation based on their hard work. They have a situation based on what you give them in increments. It's heavy. And so think about this before you look at any deals. Think about this as you're reviewing a deal. Think about this when you're creating your content, and maybe you might say, I don't need a deal. Maybe you might say, much like myself, I'd rather independently release my work, and I'll figure it out as I go. Content is key to business. You have to have a product, and today's consumption is all about digital content. And Dave is doing a good job of saying, hey, man, this is my face. This is my, what's interesting is that there was a lawsuit that was brought about against a couple video game companies. I won't say the names of these companies, but there were some dancers from New York and LA and all over the country that saw their dances that they created that were placed on these video games. The lawsuits were copyright lawsuits, and I threw my head back when I saw what the legal pursuits were, because I said to myself, this is not a copyright issue. I put it on my Facebook page. Oh, this is not a copyright issue. This is a image and likeness issue. Your image and your likeness is very, very important. If you create a dance and that dancer is mimicking, if that digital image is mimicking the way that your body moves in perfect succession, I think that that's a pursuable offense. I think that that's an infringement, but it's not upon copyright. It's upon your image, your likeness. It's your face, that's your body. But again, it's content. And the unfortunate case was that the judge decided that you can't copyright a dance. Of course you can't. And so those dancers got nothing. But yet their image and their likeness still remains on these digital formats, these video games. And so we keep coming up with new digital formats and new digital content, and artists' work continue to be reappropriated without their permission. And when I say reappropriated, I mean stolen and used, because that's what reappropriated means in the most illest of the sense. So maybe I should close this up. How long have I been talking? Close to 40 minutes. Mental health, content creation, being a producer, being an artist. Look at this Unforgiven documentary and get an understanding of the gangster part of the industry. Get an understanding of, get the stars out of your eyes and get those dreams of being popular across all formats out of your head, and look at things with a clear understanding of what real business is. Real business is two people, whether it's a corporation or two people, me and you, come together and make an agreement. That's all it is, and that's all it'll ever be. Now, the way that you flower that agreement, the way that you put the floral arrangements around that agreement, the way that you create an image around this agreement, whether it's a music video or whether it's rented Lamborghinis or whether it's a rented mansion or whether it's, an upfront payout for an advance that needs to be paid back via royalties, reaccrued, or whatever. The way that you make it look nice, whether it's, gold chains or fresh new Air Force Ones, however you flower the business agreement, at the end of the day, it's still a business agreement. It's an arrangement. And people should have the understanding of what they're signing and what it means in the long term, especially if you're a person that is in a situation where you need money right away. I want to recommend a book. This book is called The Richest Man in Babylon. This book changed my life. It changed my life. Changed my life. Like, in my life, there's the Bible, and then there's The Richest Man in Babylon. It's like top five. They say top 5 rappers dead or alive, top books. And so, I guess that's a good place to end this particular podcast. As producers, as artists, as content creators, it's very, very, very important that we look at U.S. history and we look at slavery and get an understanding of how millions of people were tortured and murdered, right? Raped, all of these horrible things. They were bled to death. They were hung. They were burned. They were lynched. All of these things happened to these people, right? My ancestors, right? To look at these people and get an understanding of what life is like post-slavery, mentally. And I need to put real emphasis on this. People were released from slavery with no mental health evaluations. There were no systems or people or resources put in place to make these people whole, right? And these people had children, and their children had children, and their children had children. And the status of their mental health has been in a place where people have had to deal with the effects of that slavery and that beating and that torture and that, lynching and things of that nature. It's very important to make sure that your mental health, right? Your mental health is in a good place. Physically, mentally, and contractually. These contracts need to be healthy. And I know I just keep going. A lot of rappers, to bring it, full circle, have expressed the fact that record labels have not offered them any healthcare benefits. None. There's no medical, there's no dental, there's no life insurance. Get an understanding of this before you sign these deals, because there's a big question mark there. Like, I guess I'll just end it there. It's a big question mark. Like, how's big entertainment going to respond to this documentary? on Instagram that this profound man has released. I'm watching in awe. I have a lot of respect for Dave as an entertainer, as a content creator, as an artist. And I compel you as my listener to go check it out. And thank you all for following and subscribing. If you haven't, please subscribe and like this video, share it with another entertainer, content creator, producer, artist, producist, artist. And no dry jokes on this one, really. I am just kind of blown away by how this thing is being brought to the forefront. And it's a new day, it's a new time, and if we don't pay attention to history, right, it's bound to repeat itself, and you don't want to find yourself on the wrong side of history. Chapelle. Peace.